For restaurants across the country, it is anything but a happy holiday season as they enter their second winter during this pandemic. Restaurants are already seeing cancellations as companies forego holiday celebrations to avoid the risks associated with COVID, especially now that Omicron is here. Large company celebrations are often what carry restaurants through the holidays. Without those, restaurants are under even more of a strain. And the lack of business is only making it harder to pay a labor force that's already seeing significant shortages as this pandemic drags on. We want to go in depth on the crisis facing the restaurant industry now. I'm joined by Dr. Emily Williams-Knight, the CEO of the Texas Restaurant Association and Foundation. Thanks so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you.
Well, let's start by talking about the Omicron variant. The restaurant industry has already suffered so much, from business to workers. How are restaurants now responding to yet another variant and surge in COVID cases?
Yeah, it's almost hard to believe that 21 months in, we're still talking about the impact to restaurants. But I can tell you in the last almost 48 hours, it has been an extraordinary change in, I think, restaurants' optimism. As you said, there's been heightened cancellations. This is the really most important time for these restaurants. They've missed 2 Mother's Days, they've missed Easters, sort of when they actually are able to recover and then go into the sort of January, February, which are more difficult. And so I can tell you that there's a quickening concern amongst restaurants, and we're tired, and I think operators are really looking for that bright spot.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, restaurants have helped all of us cope during this pandemic. You know, going out to a restaurant and a bar, for that matter, you know, is everything. So they're so important. And, you know, we've also been reporting on the lack of employees in the industry throughout this pandemic. It seems as if it's gotten worse as people have opted to look for other things. Is that situation improving at all?
You know, we've seen slight improvement, but the numbers are almost astonishing. At the height of the pandemic, just in Texas alone, we had 700,000 employees on the sidelines. 21 months later, we still have 80,000 job openings. You know, wages are up 13%. We're doing everything we can to attract people, but across the country, restaurants are not recovering because they can't get back to 100% capacity. And you have restaurants now operating at DFW Airport. There was a single person when I transited through there, and at a restaurant, and that's just really tough on the employee, and of course it's incredibly tough on that business owner as well.
I can't imagine. It's hard enough to be a restaurant employee in some situations. Can't imagine what they're going through. And of course, a lot of people are concerned about Omicron and how much more contagious it is. Yesterday, we spoke with a doctor who said it could be passed through the air just sitting in the same room as an infected person. Do you know anything about steps restaurants are taking to ensure that customers are safer right now?
Yeah, absolutely. And so when we actually reopened the country for restaurants here in Texas and across the U.S., really, we created state promises. And so we have the Texas Restaurant Promise. It's on the outside of restaurant doors, and it says there's 2 parts. What the restaurant will promise you when you come in for safety, and then what you will agree to do as well. Because we know patients are thin for a lot of consumers, and they just want to be back to dining out. But if we make that promise to each other, we're going to be able to get through this next wave just like we got through Delta. It won't be easy, but we're going to need a partnership with our consumers to make sure that we, you know, socially distance when appropriate, that if we need to wear a mask, we wear that mask at the table. But restaurants have been keeping people safe. They were some of the first to return to work when the pandemic, we first got to reopen.
Right. You're in Texas, and look at New York and all of the restaurants that popped up on the sidewalk. You know, they just built instant places to go. They've been, you know, hats off to restaurant owners and their industriousness during this to prevail, right? Well, let's talk about the old supply chain issue as well. We've had a lot of stories here at Newsy of restaurants not being able to get supplies, not even be able to get paper cups, not to get the ingredients for food. And of course, there are a shortage of drivers. How is that impacting restaurants? What are they doing to try and get around that?
You know, it's extraordinary. It goes all the way back, right? The entire supply chain for restaurants has been disrupted. And so it's straws and cups. They put sodas out the drive-through window. There's no lid. That makes it pretty difficult for the consumer. The prices of things that they can get in have skyrocketed. Beef is up north of 50%. And so let's say you bought a cut of meat for $100. That's now $200 1 year later. So of course that's going to get passed on to the consumer. I feel like every week we walk in, it's the next item that's about to be a massive crisis. We've had chopsticks and crayons and aluminum cans. We can't find drivers to get there. Just yesterday, Texas put another $3 million towards driver training to try to get drivers back. And of course, our restaurant drivers are being pinched a little bit by all the holiday deliveries and those drivers. And so it is not pretty for I say that because restaurants are just trimming menus, they're cutting items, and they're being extraordinarily flexible. And maybe the positive is the QR code that really took effect in the pandemic. They can change that menu on the fly because so many are going to have to and are doing so now.
Well, hats off to what you're doing to support restaurants. And my thought is if you go out, go ahead and over-tip your server because they probably deserve it, right?
And show grace and empathy. And please, right now, we need these folks. If you take $1 out of your pocket for food, 51 cents goes to a restaurant in this country. And so we need these people to feel supported, that they're tired, the owners are tired. So this holiday season, yes, tip more, and more importantly, just be kind. It makes a big difference.
Oh, very well said. Absolutely. We need a lot more of that right now. Thank you so much for your insights, Dr. Williams-Knight. We really appreciate it. CEO of the Texas Restaurant Association Foundation. Thank you, Emily.
Thank you.